in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome to today's European SharePoint Community webinar. My name is Shane and I am delighted to be joined by Michael Rickert, Consultant and Business Development Manager at WebCon, who will be talking to you about Do We Have a Deal? Agreement Processing in SharePoint. Remember to join the conversation about today's webinar on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @EuropeanSP and our hashtag is ESPC15. Michael will also be speaking at European SharePoint Conference 2015 in Stockholm this November. He will be joined by some of the top names in SharePoint, and we are delighted to announce that Jeff Teeper will join Seth Patton and Bill Baer for the opening keynote, where they will share their roadmap for SharePoint and OneDrive. Luckily, we still have some fantastic group booking rate discounts for European SharePoint Conference 2015. Go to www.sharepointeurope.com for more information. After the webinar, we will have a Q&A session. Type any questions you have for Michael in the questions pane in the control panel. Some questions will be selected and answered at the end of the presentation. This webinar is being recorded and you will be notified by email when it is available. And now, I'm going to pass you over to our webinar presenter, Michael Rickert. Hello, Michael.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. So today I want to talk about agreement processing in SharePoint. Let me just hide the panel menu. Okay, so to begin with, let's go with the agenda. So first of all, I would like to talk about what kind of challenges you may face when it comes to processing agreements in SharePoint, and of course how SharePoint can help, and what to do when it gets trickier and trickier, because it's never easy as it sounds. And then we'll move on to a live demo during which I would like to show you a fairly complex agreement processing application that I will create live from scratch within 30-35 minutes, and just to show you what kind of approach, what kind of features you may use. I'll be using a third-party tool for that, and then we'll go through the brief summary. Before I begin with the challenges, I want to underline one thing. Whenever you start agreement processing, but also other projects in SharePoint, you have to thinking long term. Because once SharePoint is properly implemented and you take care of user adoption, then I can guarantee the business requirements will grow and grow. So you always have to be at least 2 steps ahead of those and be prepared for what's coming. And speaking about challenges, I'd like to distinguish basically 3 stages of agreement processing in SharePoint that kind of naturally evolve one into another. And the first stage is agreement repository, just in a basic mode, so to say. The second one would require some advanced features to be implemented to be more functional and to allow to do a lot of more than in the previous stage. And the first stage would be full agreement processing system, sort of end-to-end that would handle, if not all, then most of the activities that users have to perform when it comes to agreement processing. But let's begin with the first stage, which is let's say agreement repository in a basic version. And for that, SharePoint is, of course, a perfect platform. The obvious and then the most natural choice is to use sites, libraries, folders, and you can design desired structures to put your files accordingly. But at this point, you immediately have to think about what to do with annexes. Because having agreements stored in a library is easy, but then you will face questions: what do we do with annexes? Do we store them in the same folders, same libraries, or in separate ones? How they should be named? What to do to connect original agreement with an annex? So this is something to think about even at this very early stage. Then something that is obviously connected with having basic repository is privileges. And again, SharePoint allows to do a lot of those in this area. So you can assign privileges per sites, per libraries, per folders, however you want. However, you have to choose wisely. Well, at the beginning, assigning individual privileges might be something natural, but then after a while, usually groups are something to consider. But even that, you have to, use groups wisely, not to get into too complicated structures. And again, even at this point, you have to think about exceptions, for example. So when you need to break privileges inheritance, what to do when somebody needs only a temporary access to given agreements, so substitution cases. And what to do if a business asks for advanced views. For example, a department director wants to see all agreements of his direct subordinates in a single view. So this is again something to think about even at this early stage. And the third thing is migration, because usually in the real life scenarios, it's not like you found a company and implement SharePoint immediately, although Microsoft would allow that probably. And usually you start with paper documents or electronic ones, but stored on individual hard drives. And then, of course, there's a need to have them stored somewhere else, somewhere where everybody would have access to it, at least based on privileges, of course. And again, SharePoint would be a great tool for that. You may do mass import of files and quickly transfer them from hard drives to SharePoint libraries and folders. But then, well, even before you do that, you have to think about, for example, business owners. Who should be responsible for a given agreement? Because if you won't do that, then you possibly face problems with pointing out who should do something with given agreements, for example, if it's going to expire. And then once files are migrated, you have to take care about describing them, which, well, basically gets us to the stage 2, which is advanced agreement repository. And the first thing I would like to underline is what to do with the registration of new agreements and what to do with paper documents. So the most obvious choice and the easiest one would be to manually upload them to SharePoint. But especially if you have large amounts of agreements, that won't be very effective. And if you have a lot of paper documents, then you have to scan them. And that's also problematic you have to ask yourself if you want to scan them one by one and then manually upload to SharePoint. Who should be responsible for such scanning? Because you don't want business users and high-level managers to do that. You want to save their time by implementing SharePoint. So possibly somebody on a lower level should be responsible for that. For example, an assistant or secretary. But if so, you have to ask yourself if such person should have an access to the other agreements. And in this case, you may use dedicated solutions that would first of all allow you to scan documents directly to SharePoint. And also that would allow you to do mass scanning of documents to SharePoint. And for that, you'd usually use barcodes to distinguish between given documents, so the scanner and the system knows which document is which. And then there's, of course, metadata. Again, very fairly obvious thing in SharePoint to describe documents with metadata. But then again, you have a case of responsibility. So once again, not a technological problem, maybe like a human factor. So you have to decide who should be responsible for providing metadata for the documents and how to properly do that. Because a secretary or assistant will be able to provide basic information, but he or she won't know to which cost center it should be assigned. What is the payment schedule, for example. And you can solve it easily, even two problems at once, which I mean scanning and registration plus metadata. If you do it smart, you can first of all register basic metadata like header information, and that could be done by lower level employees. And then stick a barcode on given documents and collect a whole stack of those documents. Then take them all at once to a scanner, and then based on the barcode, given scan would be attached to pre-registered basic metadata information. And then you could assign a task to somebody on a higher level to complete more advanced, to enter more advanced information, for example, about payment schedule. At least this is something I would consider doing to provide a future-proof solution. And then we move on to search and notifications, because if we think about assigning some tasks, then of course employees would prefer to be notified about them. And again, for that, SharePoint will be a perfect tool. You may configure notifications on lists, for example. Search also great feature of SharePoint, but then you have to think about some advanced scenarios. For example, to get a notification when the given agreement is about to expire and it's assigned to me but connected to a particular vendor, and then I want to have a reminder, etc., etc. Of course, you can do that in SharePoint, but if you do a lot of those, then it would take you some time. So just think about how to, you just have to think about how to do it properly. And one more thing I would like to indicate, because when it goes to search, it works fine when you have metadata, but sometimes metadata might not be enough. So you may also want to consider applying OCR, optical character recognition, to create searchable PDFs. And with such files, everyone with proper privileges, of course, would be able to search not only through metadata, but also through the content of given agreements. And then let's move on to the monitoring and the reporting. The most obvious choice and then the easiest one would be to create custom views, but that's something that would probably last for some time, but then you'd be asked to provide advanced reports in graphical way, and for that, of course, you may consider using Excel, SharePoint designer views, reporting services. So just keep that in mind that the need for advanced reporting and monitoring will eventually appear. And then we move on to the whole agreement processing system. Because so far I've been talking about repository, basically, so putting agreements, completed agreements into SharePoint. But let's go one step further. Why not generate new agreements out of the SharePoint if we have it? And of course, for that, you may use libraries with templates. So people could use a template and modify it and create a new agreement. And of course, for that, SharePoint will be a great tool as it allows to do the simultaneous work on the same Word files. But then, and again, this is a human factor. You have to think about the cases when people want to download the documents to their desktops. If you have everything stored in SharePoint, you don't want to do that. You want to have everything there. And how you can prevent it, I would suggest considering adding some automation, for example, based on metadata. So once the metadata is provided, the proper document could be generated. And then going one step further, you have to think about what to do when the agreement is generated, but then something needs to be changed. Because essentially you have information into separate sources. One is metadata, the second one is the generated file. And usually people will will cut corners and simply modify the documents and leave metadata as it were. But that's again something you probably want to avoid, since it will be much harder to search through metadata if it's not up to date. What about further processing of agreements? Once you generate it, you'd probably want to have some approvals and some ways to process it properly through the organization. And for that, of course, you may use SharePoint designer workflows and info path forms for metadata. Where SharePoint designer workflows, out-of-the-box workflows will not probably be enough in this case, not at this stage at least. So we have to go with at least designer workflows and info path forms. And then you have to think about first development and the time and resources you have to spend on developing workflows and forms. Then what even more important about change management and maintenance. So what happens when we need to introduce some modifications into the workflow? And you have, after a while, it's not something that can be done very easily. So again, it might be worth considering some alternatives. And then, last but not least, task notification and mobile access. So assuming you created the workflow and form, people want to be notified and probably have a mobile access to agreements assigned to them. And of course, you may use workflows notifications and SharePoint mobile sites. But then again, and I guarantee, there will be questions. Okay, but I want to have a dedicated mobile application for that. I want to be able to approve via email. I don't want to open a whole site. I want to have a summary of all of my active tasks, not only for agreements, but also for other workflows in a single place. So again, you have to think about a way to enable, especially business people, to be as efficient as they can be. Which takes us to the to another part of this webinar, which is the live demo. And today I would like to show you how to create a whole agreement processing application from scratch. I'll be using Webcon BPS, which is a platform that my company offers. So full disclaimer here. And I'll do that live, of course, and literally step by step. So let's begin. I'm going to my remote desktop connection right now and to the Designer Studio, which is the application we use to create workflows and forms and any kind of integration. So basically, this is one application, a single point where you can manage each and every aspect of workflows, forms, data models, etc. So as you can see, I just have the new branch here initiated, but there's nothing here. There are no form fields. There's a new workflow that basically has 2 steps and nothing else. So, well, I may begin with renaming that to, for example, agreement workflow. And I would like to begin with form by creating proper form fields to keep metadata that I want to have stored and to be able to search through it. And instantly I will divide them into groups. So first of all, I want to have details about the company that this particular agreement would be related to, stored in a one group. So let's call it client details, and then let's create proper form fields for that. So first of all, I want to be able to choose a proper company, and for that I'll choose a global field, which in my case is the field that is that have been used in other processes and is connected to external CRM, and that basically enables to search through all of the companies we work with. So I don't have to configure the connection here. I'm just using what's already done. And then I want to have information about company tax ID, for example. And I want to have an information about company address. This is something we'll need for the agreement. And then let's specify what should be listed in terms of details of the agreement. So another group, agreement details. And what I want to have is, first of all, the title of the agreement. That would be a single line of text. Another one would be effective on. So when does a particular agreement is in effect. And that would be, of course, date and time field. Let's create a new one. Oh, let me correct just the name. And another field for specifying the data when agreement is about to expire. So again, date and time. And then I would like to have any information about the value of given agreement. So let's create a value and choose a field type for floating point number. And in configuration of the field, I may immediately show it as an amount, of course, and provide a currency code in euros. And this is basically basic metadata, and I want to have something advanced as well. And in particular, I want to have a payment schedule. And for that, I'll need another form field. Let's call it payment schedule. And choose this type to item list. Item list is basically what in other solution is called repeating table. And for that, I will need some columns. So first one would be stage. And that would be single line of text. Another one would be date. It's a payment schedule, so date would probably be needed. And the last one would be value. So to specify when I need to pay off given part of the agreement. And again, I can show it as amount with currency code in euros. Let's click OK, save it. And now, and that's something that is really good about this solution, that you can see results immediately without no deployment. Before I proceed to that, I just want to create a separate sites for all of my agreements. So I want to have a single site when all agreement will be stored, when I can where I can start agreement processing, and when I can track everything that's going on with particular agreements. And for that, I will need a separate site, and I can generate it right from here. So I will specify some information that will be listed, and some web parts that will allow me to interact with the system. Then I have to choose where this site should be in my structure of sites, and give it a name, for example, agreement processing. And then I simply click generate site, and let's give it a second or two. Okay, that has been generated. Let me proceed to the Internet Explorer, to my demo environment. And when I refresh the site, as you can see, the agreement processing appeared here. So let me go there. And basically, this is the site I generated. Later on, I'll be able to track all of my active tasks and all the agreements that are somewhere in the middle and processed, and also all archived ones. But for now, I want to start an agreement workflow. Remember that I only have two steps, one start and second final. This is the only thing we have right now. And as you can see, there are no form fields, but since we manage everything in a single applications, and forms are tightly connected with workflows, I can decide what kind of fields should be visible at each step of the workflow. So as you can see, there's a start here and the final there, and I can decide what kind of fields should be visible in the start step. So let's just make them all visible, and the same for the payment schedule, which is listed in another tab. Save the process, come back to the site, refresh, and as you can see, the fields are here. So let's see what do we have here. The company, which is connected to a data source. When I open the data source, I can check what's inside, and as you can see, there's a lot of different companies. We have 1,000 records here, and we just reached B barely. But I want to find the webcon, so of course I can find it by typing a name or a tax ID, which is always a unique number, and simply click OK. What else do we have? A title, so let's say sales agreement. I can specify when does the agreement start, when it expires, let's say 30th in a year, what's the value, and what's the payment schedule. So for example, stage 1, date in a week from today, and 2,500 should be paid, and I can save and continue. And this data is already stored in the system and will be available no matter what we do with the workflow later on. So I'm not entirely satisfied with the form. I want to add some adjustment to it to make it more intuitive and simplify users' work. So first of all, I have a company field which is connected to a data source and contains a lot of information about given companies. So I think there's no point for me to enter tax ID and address separately. So based on the choice in the company field, I want tax ID and address to be filled in automatically. And this is something we can do very easily here. So let's just go to the designer, to the client details and the company field, and into the configuration. And as you can see, we have a source column with information about the company, and we have a target field. So this is when I can specify where data should be populated based on the choice in the company field. So let me choose company tax ID for tax ID and company address for the address. Click OK, save the process, come back to the site, just refresh it, and when I erase and validate again, the tax ID and the address will be available. So as I said, to prevent people from doing anything outside of SharePoint, some automation is required, and this is one of the examples you may apply, and then as you can see, it's very easy to do. But going one step further, as you remember, you have to be at least 2 steps ahead always. I don't want that data to be editable. I'm assuming that my data source is correct, so I don't want people to mess with it. So basically, let me make those fields uneditable for the end users, and for that I go to the tab called Field Matrix again, and for the start step of the workflow, I want it to be in read-only mode. Save the process, and again, and this is a great feature of the system, the result will be available immediately. And just let me show you that still we can populate it automatically, but not change a thing manually. So let's just save this data. And then let's think about what else can be done with this form. The other thing I see is the payment schedule. It's very wide. I have only 3 fields here, so I don't want it to be so wide. And for that, there is another simple solution. So let's go back to the Designer Studio and to the tab called Global Form Template. And I can basically drag and drop one of the fields into the proper column and save the process, come back to the site, refresh, and as you can see, the payment schedule adjusted itself to the size of other fields. Okay, what else can we do to make users' life easier? I have a value of the agreement, and there's a payment schedule below. And usually, well, always, in all cases, you'd prefer to have a match between total value specified in payment schedule with the total value for the whole agreement. And currently, I could enter any metadata, and that would probably result in having wrong data on the form. So I want to prevent that. And to do so, I want to enforce the mechanism that would check if the total value specified in all of these stages of payment schedule matches the value specified here. And for that, there's another simple solution. So we go back to the designer and go to the configuration of the payment schedule. And we can easily say that we want to add a verification to the form based on value column and based on field column. And what the system should do is to verify and show me a suggestion, possibly that I'm wrong when I'm wrong. So let's save the process, come back to the site, refresh, and see what happens when I add a new stage to the payment schedule. The system automatically suggested me what should be another value to have a match with the value specified in the form field. But let's see what happens when I provide stage 2, maybe October 30th, and exceed the amount specified in the value field above. So let's just try to save and continue. And this is what happens. So basically, the system says, sorry, you cannot do that. The expected value is 5,000. And when I change it to 2,500 and save again, it's all working perfectly fine. Okay, but this is just metadata, and we don't have an agreement yet. So let's take care of that. And to generate an agreement out of the system, I would need a template. And template is basically a Word file, and I have it stored in SharePoint library. So let me just open it. And this is basically the template, the standard template I have. I have some details about one side of the agreement, and I would probably need to enter some additional data. And again, to save time, I want to generate an agreement automatically out of the system based on that template. So what we can do is we can use an add-in to Word for generating templates. As you can see, it automatically connected based on my only the login user to the processes I have access to. Plenty of them, but the first one is agreement processing. And what I need to do is basically to drag and drop proper variables into the template. So let's begin with client details and company name. Oh, sorry about this. That's okay. And then the company address. And then the tax ID, something that we'll need as well. And the rest of the details like title. So just a simple drag and drop mechanism. Oh, sorry about this. Okay, at least you are seeing this is a live presentation, so that's the best proof. Let's provide additional data, effective on, and expires on. And then the whole payment schedule. Click OK. Of course, I can customize the design of the table itself using Word features. And then I want to have something to be able to track this document properly. So first of all, I want to have an information with the unique number of the agreement. And then I want to have a barcode to be able to scan a printed document and be able to find it in the system. So let's just save it and close. And what I need is simply to copy the link to this document. And let's go to the Designer Studio and to the workflow. And I want to be able to generate this document in the first step of the workflow. So let's go to Actions and create a new action that would be triggered with menu button and call it Generate Agreement. I can even change the icon for that. Let's choose a word so it's not confusing to the end users. Let's go to choose proper action, generate a Word file, of course, and into configuration. And here I just specify where is the template for the agreement stored and what should be the file name. For example, agreement. And again, I can use variables using the editor here and using the formulas I have. So for example, agreement and company name and possibly, for example, current date. Okay, let's just save it. Click OK, save the process, and see how it works. Let me come back to the form. Let's refresh it. And as you can see, Generate Agreement appeared here. So let's just click it, and the Word file has been attached automatically. And what I can do, I can simply open it and see how does it look. And as you can see, the metadata has been transferred into the form. Everything looks perfect. Okay, so let's close it. And that mainly covers the form part. Let's take care of the workflow. So we have a start and final step. And I want something more. So my first step would be superior approval. And this is something I can also modify live. I don't have to create a whole process and then deploy it and then see how it works. I can do it step by step and see if I'm satisfied with the result and modify live. So let's create a path to it, call it register. And I have to specify who should be responsible for superior approval. So let me just go to the path configuration. And in task creation, I have to choose who will be responsible for superior approval. And in this case, I will choose a predefined option assigned to a superior based on the Active Directory structure. So my superior can be different from my colleague's superior. The system will behave dynamically in this case. So let's click OK, save the process, come back to the site again. And if I refresh, as you can see, besides save and continue, also register button will be available. So let's just use it and proceed to the superior approval step. And as you can see, there's no form here, and this is something I will take care of in a moment. Just I want to indicate that the task is assigned to Lucas Wrubel, which is my superior in this case, so the system behaves exactly how we designed it to be. So let's just enable these form fields also in superior approval step. So again, fields matrix, and as you can see, there's a start, final, and superior, and this is not the exact logic I want to have here. So let me just quickly fix that. And then the second step on the field matrix is what I want it to be. And what I can do is basically copy configuration of fields from the previous step and do the same for the payment schedule. Save the process, come back and refresh, and all data is here. When I go into the edit mode, I'm able to edit it because I'm an administrator of the whole process, but this task is assigned to Lucas. And what does the superior should do here? He or she should review the document and basically see the view again. But this is the case I wanted to indicate. I indicated in the previous part what happens if we need to provide. We need to introduce changes into already generated document. Of course, I could edit it here. For example, change New York to New Jersey. The file, by the way, would be automatically saved to the form. So again, no need to download anything on the hard drive. You may do it directly from here. But then let's say we need to change some metadata, for example, the expiration date. And doing that twice would be time consuming. So what the system offers is when I change the date of expiration on the form, let's do that. Maybe I will type it manually to, I'm sorry, to 2022 and save it. Then using Word add-in, I'm able to update the generated document. And for that, let's see how it behaves. The expiration date is 2016. And then I'll click Update Form Fields. And then it's 2022. So I do it only once on the form level and then just update the file. And let's just save it and directly close it. And when I refresh, you will see that the document has been modified and when. And one more thing I want to do as a supervisor, I want to have the document, once approved, I want it to be in uneditable form, in PDF probably. And again, to prevent saving the files on the hard drive and converting them manually, we can do that automatically out of the system. And this is very easy to do. So let's just go to the workflow designer and to the configuration of superior approval step and add a new action in attachments menu. Let's call it convert to PDF and choose a proper action. And basically that's the only thing I have to do. I just save the process, come back to my form again, refresh, and then convert to PDF is available. When I click it, it's instantly converted into PDF form and I can preview it. Okay, so let's move on to another step. Let's say I want to have legal department approval as well. So again, drag and drop a new step connected with a path. Let's call it approve and define who should be responsible for it. And in this case, I want it to be directed to a group of lawyers, for example, and that group in my case is called Demos Left Legal. Basically, one of them would be able to, the first who sees it and then opens it will be able to review it and do a proper action. So let's just save the process, come back to the site, refresh it, and the approve button is here, so let's use it. And then we'll move on to legal department approval. By the way, the barcodes you see in the meantime are just the confirmation that the action performed by user actually happened and it's okay. So again, in legal department approval, there are no form fields, so you know the drill. We have to go to the field matrix, and again, we can just copy all the information, all the configuration for the previous step. This time, I'll just make everything read-only, and the same for client details and agreement details. Yeah, this is actually here. So let me just change the order once again. Save the process, come back, refresh, and all data is here. And what can I do as a legal department member? First of all, I'm interested, well, what's the history of the document? Enforcing everyone to enable track changes mode is fairly hard. So there's always a situation when somebody forgets to do that. But having everything stored in the system in SharePoint and using capabilities of add-in for Word, I'm easily able to track all of the changes in the document and simply show differences between current version and the original version, for example. So I can see that New York has been changed to New Jersey, and the date has been changed as well. Okay, and again, as a legal department member, I want to provide an approval, but something more than just clicking into the system and confirming it. I want to have a digital signature applied to a document. And again, this is something we can do here, just covering a whole scope of activities. And basically, this prevents from switching from one application to another. You do everything in a single interface and have everything stored in a single place. So let's go to the legal department approval configuration. Let's configure a new action in attachments menu. And let's call it sign digitally. and choose proper action from the workflow. Sign an attachment, and the only thing I want to switch into configuration to be attached by user, by individual certificate. Let's save the process, come back to the site, refresh, and let's sign the document. Click OK. The PDF file has been digitally signed, and I can preview it, and you can check what's going on later on. Okay, and let's move on to the final stage of the workflow. So the final positive step, which would be called approved. Let's create a path, call it approved, and that would allow legal department also to move on the workflow and change its status to approved. So let's just save, refresh, click approve, and the document is approved. There's only payment schedule defined here, so I can easily fix that once again. Save the process, come back, refresh, and now once the agreement is generated and approved, I can send it directly from the system via email to my contractor, for example, or to a vendor by simply having a proper action. And what's great about the system that it offers an add-in to Outlook that will allow me to easily send an email along with attachment, because I can just drag and drop it, and if I need, I can drag and drop all metadata as well. So again, you don't have to use anything outside of the system. You don't have to store files locally. And I will just send it to myself just to be faster. And as you can see, there's a specific ID here, and by that ID I will be able to track this agreement, for example, whenever I receive a response. So I'll be able to display all metadata and access proper workflow immediately. And when I click send, the system will ask me if I want to attach a copy of the email to the workflow element, and clicking yes and refreshing will result in having email conversation tab available, and basically also storing all relevant correspondence in a single place. So you don't have to do the advanced searching. You have all documents, all attachments, and email conversation with important decision stored in a single place. And whenever you need to find a document after a while, this is my active task. It's empty because it's already approved, but I have a site with all elements, and this is where the agreement is stored. And the last thing I want to show, because time is running out, is the history of what's been going on with the workflow. So basically, you are able at all times to evaluate and see what's been going on, what kind of data has been added, and that's in blue, what has been changed. For example, the agreement itself changed, if any proper actions were executed, and that also works for sending email notifications. So you always have a transparent view on what's been going on with the agreement. And thank you all for listening. I'll be in Stockholm quite soon, and I invite you to become a SharePoint superhero with us. So basically, please meet us in Stockholm. I'll be happy to discuss all of your requirements and discuss the options and help you becoming a SharePoint superhero. Back to you, Shane.
Thank you, Mikael. That was really in-depth. That was a great presentation. Just for anyone out there that's curious to know, yes, the the presentation is being recorded, and we will be sending an email to all attendees afterwards, where we will be sending them a link where they can download and watch the full presentation. We just have one quick question for you, Michael, and that's in relation to exporting to Excel. Can a person export, say, a simple 60,000K query document? Is that possible?
60,000 what?
So I have a question here. It goes, so when export to Excel, will it be ready to show workflow elements? Yeah. Of course.
Sorry, because there was some distortion on my part. All data is stored in the SQL database, actually. So we can easily, first of all, have an access to it. And second of all, export it to the Excel format as well.
Okay, that's brilliant. Michael, thank you so much for your time, and thanks for taking the questions, and thank you to our attendees for posting the questions. Remember, by being part of the European SharePoint community, you have unlimited access to a world of content, including blogs, webinars, how-to videos, and ebooks. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you soon on our next webinar.
Thank you. Have a nice day.